Okay, so maybe firstly, if you can define who you are.
So, so in terms of kind of how I see myself, obviously, a woman in a field where, we're obviously a minority. I see myself as a pioneer, in the field, particularly in the area of social robotics and human robot interaction. I see myself as an innovator and an entrepreneur. I founded a startup company called Jibo to try to bring social robots to the mass consumer market. I see myself as a mother and a wife, all of these things also are really deeply important to me. I see myself as a mentor. I have a group of really brilliant, talented, graduate and undergraduate students. And I take their futures very seriously. And, I see myself as an agent for broader positive change. When I see something that I think, could be more equitable, can be more fair, could be better, I try to tackle that head on. So, at MIT, I direct a new initiative called RAISE, that stands for Responsible AI for Social Empowerment and Education, because AI is transforming everything. I'd say the AI genie is out of the bottle. It's more than computer science. It's more than, these technical fields. It's for everyone. It's in society. And, we've seen, tremendous innovation and positive things because of things like artificial intelligence and machine learning. And we've certainly seen many examples where it has not gone as expected, right? And it's exacerbated inequity and so forth. So, we've seen how it can, I've designed systems that do this. We've seen how AI can shape people's ideas and opinions and behaviors, and I try to do that to help people to succeed and to flourish. Doesn't have to necessarily be the case, right? And so, and we know the field is not diverse or inclusive, right? We're a long way from that. And so I have a big effort on, through that initiative to try to create an AI literate society and help inspire underrepresented groups. So whether it's, younger students, K-12, as they think about professions and going into careers, or even the adult workforce, how do we open the magic of this field in a way that people feel empowered to use it to create solutions for their communities who they feel that they represent those communities. So, again, that's just another example of where I see something that I'd like to see a better world. And I'm trying to take action to move, towards that direction with obviously an amazing group of people. I can't do any of these things all by myself, right? So I guess in that regard, I see myself hopefully as someone who leads by making people feel that they are a part of something that they care passionately about, and trying to facilitate that and support that, so that we all feel like we can make a positive change together.
Awesome. So maybe I want to go again since you are one of pioneer in social robotics, and I think that's something very inspiring. I would like to skim the design, because I think that's something I find very intriguing. That's the way I think when you are a graduate student, the way of thinking of the design at this time, because I think that's very important, the design and way of thinking about designing social robots back in more than 20 years. What is sort of your mind early in this designing, for example, Leonardo or Cosmic, these early robots?
Yeah, so, way back, before Kismet, before my PhD work, Kismet's, kind of widely regarded as the world's first, autonomous social robot. Before that, I was working, at MIT as a graduate student, with Professor Rod Brooks at the time started off to be the mobile robotics group. Then it transitioned to be the humanoid robotics group. But it was, initially about autonomy, building autonomous robots, autonomous mobile robots. And when we started to shift to look to humanoids early on, a lot of the reason why people were interested in humanoid robots is obviously because so much of our, human engineered environment is for the human morphology. So if you want to build a robot that can navigate stairs and human spaces and use human artifacts and so forth, the humanoid morphology made a lot of sense. But you didn't hear a lot of people talking about the ability for people to interact and collaborate, and derive value from these kinds of technologies in terms of, the everyday person. So, I guess in some ways, I kind of liken it to the moment where computers were the huge, expensive machines kind of in back rooms that only experts knew how to use. And then, the personal computer revolution came, people started asking, what does it mean for anyone to be able to use a computer, right? I kind of view social robotics as that same question for robots, where robots were expensive, kind of, extravagant technologies at the time. What would it mean literally for anyone to be able to interact and get value from interacting with a autonomous robot? And, in terms of the design and the experience, it's like, so what is the universal interface, rather than expecting, young children or older adults to study manuals on how to interact with a robot, the thought was the social interface was the universal interface. And we already knew from science fiction and, people naturally anthropomorphized, autonomous robots, whether they looked humanoid or not, just these cues of animacy. People readily would anthropomorphize them, maybe not treat them exactly human, but as a living thing, as a creature. And so it seemed it was something that people were already, naturally inclined or predisposed to do. So then the challenge was, how do you design a robot that can support its end of that interaction, right? So it's, one thing to have people treat a robot socially like an animate creature. It's a completely different question on how the robot can actually understand those cues, respond in a reasonable way, collaborate with people. And so, that was the original kind of impetus around the social interface. And of course, when people interact with each other, it's not just about cognitively conveying information. We're profoundly social and emotional beings. That's a critical part of how we interact, how we understand the world around us. And so, I think, from very, early on at that time, the question of how do we build autonomous robots with social and emotional intelligence was kind of a radical idea, not just intelligence, but the behavior to go along with it, to really be in that dynamic interaction with people. And so it just opened up a whole area. And I think, whenever you propose something that's, that kind of is that different from the status quo and what kind of the accepted, so-called interesting problems were to work on, during the day, I think it was an idea and a perspective whose time was right, because at the time, so Japan was already, thinking about autonomous robots and in fact humanoid robots, because they understood they have this, rapidly aging society, and they were thinking around innovations and technologies to help their society, deal with that demographic shift. So, when you propose an idea as radical as, what if you could build a robot that literally anyone could interact with, that's socially and emotionally intelligent? There was already a really, call it a killer app, but a really significant use case that people got it. Yes, people who are not experts in robotics and AI are going to have to be able to interact with these technologies if it's going to help people age with independence, et cetera, et cetera. So, timing is often, a big part of when something becomes successful and takes off. And so I think it was a culmination of the timing of posing that question. It was also a really fascinating time in human-computer interaction and, psychology in general, right? So, if you look at kind of the bigger swirl of ideas, particularly, around MIT specifically, but even more broadly, for many years, kind of emotion was kind of looked down upon as a topic to study in psychology. And at that time, you had just started to see some, very influential books about affective science and neuroscience and emotion and intelligent decision making, like Antonio Damasio. So those ideas were starting to swirl and be taken seriously, that you can't have intelligent behavior without emotions, right? That was kind of a radical concept, but was gaining, traction. We had, Roz Picard, right, at the Media Lab, right around the time I was doing work with social robots, she was thinking about affective computing, right? We had Justine Cassell, also at the Media Lab, who was looking at embodied conversational agents, virtual humans, but embodied conversational agents. And so, these were two amazing pioneering women who were also on my PhD committee, So these new burgeoning fields of AI and human computer interaction were just, gaining traction. And so the social robotics was kind of the physical robotic instantiation of a swirl again of ideas that were kind of all happening at that time, right? So, the societal need, the swirl of intellectual ideas, people actually taking that seriously and starting to think about how do you do it computationally. I think all of that fed into kind of the moment of like, why Kismet when it happened. It's all of those things.
Mm-hmm. Great. Maybe I want to ask you about maybe what's the missing piece so far in social robot, the personal robots. You have the most experience now in academia and also from entrepreneurship, and you have been in the two worlds. From your experience in this long journey, what's still missing? If you can tell, this is the point here.
Yeah, so I mean, in terms of what's missing in terms of seeing, social robots, kind of finally fulfilling our science fiction dreams of being a ubiquitous technology, in our human spaces. I mean, I think in the most basic sense, what's been missing is sort of the killer billion-dollar business case for it, right? I mean, I think it's really that simple, right? So, if we, maybe we're coming upon that now with, again, global aging society and so forth, but this sense of like, if you're really going to turn the research into, a ubiquitous technology, you need a viable business case, and it's not just enough to kind of hobble along. I mean, you probably want something that's like radically successful, like, the personal computer, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a challenge right now. And part of it's because, I mean, as we appreciate in robotics, building things can actually move and interact in the physical world. It is really hard versus having kind of pristine, purely digital information, right? I mean, it's messy, it's uncertain. I mean, it's hard. It requires, computation. When we think about the energy efficiency of these things, big improvements in battery technology, but, and cloud computing. But these things are still like, you could imagine that, we would benefit if those things were even more and better, cheaper, more, more powerful, et cetera, et cetera. We have this world now of conversational agents in a tube and talking speakers. And so when you talk about the mass consumer mindset, it's been challenging because, people see that now as a nearest neighbor. Even if a robot can do more, manipulate the world physically, et cetera, there's a sense now that I think that conversational AI, 10,000 skills is cheap. You can get that for $40, right? So that is a kind of a business trend that's kind of like working against us, right? So I think, we need to kind of find, again, this really compelling business application that, the physicality and the abilities of the robot are essential. There is a price point that people are willing to pay, whether that's a company or an individual, a consumer, like there has to be a market for it at a price people are willing to pay. All these things have to align. I think, they will eventually. I mean, I don't think anybody has ever doubted or questioned that there will be a time when autonomous robots are ubiquitous. It's just we have to find that kind of killer business case for it to really like get out there in a big way. Otherwise, it's going to continue to be smaller opportunities, startups trying. It's been definitely kind of fits and starts, but I think the derivative is positive. I think we're getting closer, but we haven't quite nailed it yet. And there's forces that are making it harder given other nearest neighbor technologies and now perceived price points and value of those technologies, which, obviously were extremely expensive to develop. If you're a huge multi-billion-dollar company, you can kind of, quote unquote, kind of give it away for free. But if you're a startup, you actually got to make a profit. So it's tough. It's tough for young companies, the innovative, disruptive. It's hard in robotics for young, innovative, because that's typically where disruption happens, is with startups, right? It's hard in robotics for early stage companies to do that, right? Anyway, so I think that's a big part, just a very practical part of what hasn't fallen into place yet, and kind of some of the forces that are making it challenging.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Maybe I want to ask you your opinion. I think there was discussion about, for example, the pet robots, for example, like dog robot or cat robots versus the actual cat or dog. That one of cases. Or for example, also for other companies, they try using arm robot, for example, helping elderly in home. For you, there's many factors here. The aspect that's connection that we have with the human, and also I think that's what you have been working on, expression and movement, and that's how empathy increase and connection. But when you see this example, do you think some cases doesn't make sense to you? I mean, do you disagree with certain approaches in social robots? I don't know if you hold like controversial views, or you disagree with certain approach in designing social robots, whether in academia or in social life, like.
So, I think, maybe one of the advantages of kind of the slow ubiquity of social robots, and, particularly because that's my area of expertise, is because it's not like you flip the switch and they're out there, and affecting millions of people's lives like AI has done. We're able to develop and study and deploy and understand in a much more iterative, responsible way. So within academia, we can try to understand, the scientific aspects of it. We're becoming more and more acutely aware of the importance of the responsible design aspects of it. We are starting to understand more and more how people psychologically and emotionally engage with these technologies. We are starting to look at, use cases, potentially like highly impactful use cases where this kind of technology could be particularly interesting and effective. So in some sense, because it almost by definition has had to move more slowly and gradually, we are better able and positioned for, the researchers basically to really try to provide, the scientific, the computational, the sociological, the design practices, the insights on how we try to do this in a way that really makes sense for people in their lives, right? I think if this became an overnight success and went, viral, so to speak, we would have found a lot of like, whoa, that was unexpected. Oh, So anyway, maybe, it's been, kind of a backhanded advantage maybe. So in terms of the controversial aspects, I think, I don't think it's controversial, but I would say one of the big questions that now kind of drives my philosophy and my work is, so much of AI out there is about driving efficiency and productivity and kind of the business of it, et cetera, et cetera. And, I find myself asking the question, well, what does it mean to build, an intelligent technology that actually helps us to flourish as human beings? What does it mean to create a technology that actually helps us to become who we aspire to be, right? So, that's a lecture I have, I think, as an academic, and then it's been guiding the research and the applications I've done, where it's not about building an intelligent technology that competes or replaces people at all. It's really about trying to think about how do we design these intelligent, kind of very human-centered, supporting a more holistic human experience, supporting our humanity more holistically, where our ability to think, engage, behave, again, is not just our cognitive selves. We are social creatures. We're emotional creatures. Yes, we're cognitive creatures. We're physical creatures. A lot of my, my work, the work of myself and my group of my students is showing the more you can holistically engage and support people across these very human dimensions, Not surprisingly, the more deeply people engage and the better the outcomes. They learn better. They're better able to stick to a medical intervention. They're better able to, be more emotionally resilient with a technology that engages them as like an emotional wellness coach, right? So, I think this is kind of one of the big takeaways is, how do we design technologies in general that really support the human experience so we can be more successful with those technologies to help us to achieve deeply meaningful goals, right? Ordering pizza is kind of like meaningful in one way, but it's not like being, achieving like emotional resilience and wellness in a time of stress. To me, that's deeply meaningful. Being able to achieve a high quality education that opens opportunities is deeply meaningful. Ability to age with independence is deeply meaningful. I mean, these are the kinds of problems that I'm the most interested in thinking about how we design technologies that help us be successful in those dimensions, And it causes us, to ask questions differently, right? So when we look at personalization, for instance, we find again and again, there's no one size fits all, right? When you want to really engage somebody in a way that helps them learn better, you really have to think, about a much deeper kind of element of personalization, right? There's how you personalize not only the curriculum, for instance, if you're trying to learn a new skill, but the communication and the motivation and all these other aspects, right? We're definitely also starting to see, because we do a lot of, we're trying to also understand the psychology of how people engage with these technologies, because we want to design technology that help people be the most successful, have the best outcomes, right? And so, we are starting to appreciate more and more, just, again, we're human beings, right? We evolved in social groups to collaborate, to learn together, to come together, to, again, deal with our emotional support and wellness. All these kinds of things are deeply social and collaborative processes. What we're finding, much like akin to the human literature, is the better, the closer reported relationship people report of having with a social robot is often also tied with higher outcomes. So we know from the human literature, the closer the relationship a student feels they have with their teacher, better learning outcomes. The closer the relationship a patient feels they have with their doctor or clinician, the better health outcomes. Intriguingly, we're starting to see that same trend with a social agent like a robot. And again, the reason why is because we're humans, right? We're human beings. And the more, again, we think about how to design these technologies that engage us in ways that, again, bring out our best ways of empowering ourselves, that's, I think, kind of one of the more recent kind of very powerful but also provocative insights we have, because, again, that's a two-sided coin. We're trying to do it in ways to help people thrive and flourish, but now you're also talking about deeply persuasive systems, potentially deeply manipulative systems, right? Systems that can engender not just trust like reliability and predictability, but trustworthiness, right? Emotional bond and connection, that can be extremely manipulative, right? So this is the provocative aspect of the work is, it's two sides of the coin. The more you can engage people in these ways, the better the experience, the better their outcomes, the more successful they can be. They can transform themselves, but put in the wrong hands, in control of a wrong entity who's not pro-socially minded, there are real risks there. And so that's a big reason why I'm a huge proponent of AI literacy. People need to understand these technologies. We've seen the impact in social media already. Again, these socially engaging agents, whether they're robot or virtual, have, these same, potential influences and capabilities. People need to understand that, and they need to have an informed voice on how they're designed, how they're used, how they're deployed in society. so that we can be, not only, responsible users of these kinds of technologies and have a voice in how they're, again, used in society. But again, also, I want the next, upcoming generations of designers and developers to be very ethically and responsibly minded about these things too. So the way we educate our engineers, our computer scientists, it's like we just do the technical. We don't really, educate people in a balanced way to think about the bigger ramifications of those technologies. And so, again, through our work in Raise at MIT, we are trying to change that. We are designing the curriculum so that people learn the ethics, the responsible design, the ramifications, to think through these things, to have the design tools and frameworks right alongside they learn about the algorithms and they learn how to build amazing things kind of with these technologies. I think that shift in how we educate is really important, So, and I think in that way that, our technical talent will be better able to collaborate with designers and sociologists, all these other disciplines, artists that are important, I think, to create, kind of the most desirable, powerful, helpful technological solutions, right? So I think that's an important shift for our field in terms of like how we train our people in these fields.
Mm-hmm. I think this is very excellent, and thanks for highlighting this aspect. And I want to skew that case because you mentioned it's manipulative, I think, and risky, and this kind of tools, maybe some of them addictive for us. And when you compare it with personal robots, and the goal is to have this kind of companion and strive in our life, when you look to the space of the design, here we have some such system manipulative, and I think if we speak about embodied this machine, I think that's also what you're doing, the embodied social or embodied intelligence. If you can correct me in that case, what are the things you think that should be done? Besides that, of course, what you're doing is very admirable. You do the literacy for AI and K-12, but what is actually really in that space you think the solution is?
I mean, I think, when you look at this again just through the lens of the capability and the intelligence of these kinds of technologies, I think we're at a point now, like when people talk about, general purpose AI versus narrow AI, right? So I think, in the area of, social robotics, kind of consumer facing robots, I do think we're at the point now where the technologies and the algorithms are good enough that we can actually design some solutions that actually can bring real benefit in limited ways, right? In scoped kind of limited ways. And we're seeing use cases, examples, and certainly in the academic literature and, increasingly slowly, some commercial examples where, again, it's kind of like narrow, scoped. We can see some real benefit. Of course, there's like a long way we have to go to creating kind of our, the anthropomorphic robot of our Star Wars or Star Trek visions, right? We got a long way to go in so many areas, right? But I'm encouraged in that I don't think we have to have solved all of that to actually start to create things that actually, again, bring real benefit, right? I do think we can start doing that now. I think, a lot more of the challenges are probably, I mean, yes, they're hard to they are hard to technically create, obviously, but all of the other facets around, again, the responsible design, the ethics, how you deal with, privacy, security. I'm like, these are also the really kind of challenging things that we need to get right. And probably it's good for us to cut our teeth on that on simpler systems, So, I think in some sense, we're in a really exciting time because I think we can create things with, again, the technologies and algorithms we have that are compelling. And there's still a long, long, long way to go on all of these dimensions that we've talked about in terms of, much more flexible, much more generalizable intelligence, agents that can actually converse with people versus be transactional voice controlled systems, which is largely what we have right now. We're basically commanding these systems with our voice. We're not having a conversation. We're not building a relationship over time. in our work, when we look at things like education, health, emotional wellness, and so forth, I can tell you they're desiring those capabilities. They are frustrated, with just transactional, personified AI systems because they just go against our expectations. You talk to the agent yesterday, you expect it to remember something about what you said. So you're not having to literally repeat yourself as if it's what do you call it? Amnesic, right? I mean, these systems are very amnesic, right? Or, you talk to your agent in one room, it's Alexa, whatever, you go into your next room, it has no idea, right? It's kind of so it's these, it's almost kind of laughable when you think about the models that people have right now. It's the exact same persona, but no context awareness whatsoever, in terms of even just you interacting with, the network in your home, right? So anyway, we actually did a research project looking at this very question of kind of migratable AIs and thinking about, this kind of the 2x2 world of identical embodiment, embodiment versus kind of its persistence of memory about you, right? So what if you could migrate, from your smart speaker to a robot to a smart screen, and it actually could sustain that relationship and that interaction over time and space in different locations, versus literally it's, a different persona. It's the Google, at home, and then it's an Alexa, and the robot, out in the world, it's you've changed embodiment, you've changed location. Maybe people don't expect it to know. If you had the case where it did remember, now that's getting really creepy, because why is it that the thing, the Google Home I talk to in my home, why is it this Alexa device now understand? That gets spooky, right? So anyway, these are really interesting questions when we think about that intersection of persona and what these things can remember about you across context and across time, because our kind of human assumptions are the Star Wars vision, right? Is that there is kind of this persistent memory about you over time and so forth. But now what if that persona can change embodiments? I don't know. These are kind of the fun, interesting questions. I think that kind of is kind of begging, what's next for these kinds of technologies, and how we need to think about, again, the psychology of engagement and the ethics of those kinds of design decisions.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. Maybe I would like to ask you, Cynthia, then in that case, do you think embedding emotion, and of course it's consciousness and sentience, still maybe mystery to understand how it could be in machine learning or AI, do you think it's necessary to have this actual emotion if you really have been that as we are human, instead of using effective computing, for example? I don't know what your thought about that, the emotion, the real emotion as a human.
I mean, the question of emotion is really fascinating, because I can just tell you, from all my conversations over time in designing these technologies, you kind of start to appreciate kind of what are people kind of really getting at when they express concerns or confusions and so forth. And I think, part of my mental model of this has always been, we live in this world of many different kinds of intelligences, many different kinds of creatures, dogs, cats, birds, right? Many different kinds of entities that all have their niche of intelligence. And in some of those cases, their niche elements of emotion, right? Dog emotion are not human emotions. Dolphin emotions are not human emotions. We don't expect them to be. It's interesting when we talk about robots, and I think largely because of our science fiction, the assumption seems to be robots should have human emotions. And to which I have to say, robots will never have human emotions. They're not human. Why? Humans have human emotions, right? So there's kind of this conflation of it's not real or authentic emotion unless it's human emotion, and yet we don't expect that of our dogs or our cat. You know what I mean? So there's kind of this conflation, I think. I think when people talk about the authenticity and then you just program it in, kind of misgiving, my sense of it is people feel that emotions are earned. They're not designed in, but you go through a life experience trajectory. Things happen to you. You learn and change from those experiences. And in that way, the emotional responses and things that you have are really grounded in the fact that you have experienced them and you kind of like, you've earned them. They weren't just given to you. So I think this is also kind of this, when you dig under the surface, like when people say, but you can't just program in emotions, I think what they're saying is emotions are earned. They're earned through the school of hard knocks. They're earned through experience. And I don't think they're authentic or real unless they're grounded in actual lived experience or, what's lived for a robot. I mean, experienced over time, over circumstance, over context. I think that's another thing that I think people are really getting at when they make a comment like, you can't just program them in. So, I have always been kind of the opinion that robots can absolutely have authentic, genuine emotions, but they will be robot emotions. And you could argue there's primordial kind of precursors in social robots today. I am not going to say, I don't know if any colleagues of mine would say social robots have authentic social robot emotions. I think we have primordial elements of that, and I think, as these systems become more autonomous, able to interact and remember and engage over longer periods of time and learn and evolve, I think we're going to start to feel like they're getting to be more authentic for what a robot is. I kind of think that's going to be also just part of the evolution. I think, a lot of the early thinking, interestingly, right, about emotions in AI were very oriented towards intelligent decision making, right? And so emotions kind of have all of these different dimensions, right? There's the role of emotion and affect in intelligent decision making, right? So we have these different kind of emotional states that help facilitate different kinds of decision making in different kinds of contexts. They lead to more intelligent behavior. I think a lot of the early modeling, a lot of the early work was looking at it from that lens. So emotion as it pertains to more sensible, not intelligent, more sensible, I guess, decision making. There is the deeply internal aspect of emotion. And I think when people say emotion, that is the dominant thing they're thinking about, is what is my emotional experience as a conscious individual? What do I feel, and how could a robot ever feel these things? That's getting into qualia. And it's embodied, right? And there's, I think we could kind of poke and prod at that and start to kind of build those kinds of attributes probably into machines also, if you felt they were really critical. But then the other aspect of emotion that's also really critical for us as human beings, as a social species, is the interpersonal dimension. And there we are absolutely, building systems that are engaging people in the social dynamic affective space, right? And we are able to, again, to design these systems where people's behavior can affect the internal affective computing processes within a robot, change its behavior, change how it learns. And we can see, through a lot of our kind of case studies and applications, the affective social behavior of a robot towards a person is yes, shaping human behavior attitude. So we are absolutely exploring in very important and ethically relevant ways the interpersonal space of emotion between people and robots, right? So again, when I think about emotion, I think about all these different kind of dimensions. I think most people, when they say emotion, they mean the deeply personal introspective. But emotions, for us as human beings and for other species, it's bigger and broader than that, right? So I think we just need to be more, kind of more reflective in when we use the word, what do we really mean? What are we really saying? So anyway, that's just kind of some of my perspectives of what I've been learning and kind of teasing apart when I hear people kind of express concerns or reservations or skepticism. Like I think it's these kind of layers and nuances that I'm learning, I think, through those conversations.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. Maybe I want to ask you, there's something was counterintuitive in the studies you have been doing in that person robot was human. Maybe something was counterintuitive. Maybe I don't know, the behavior or maybe the interaction between the human and person robots. Do you have any moments you can recall that was counterintuitive or maybe you didn't understand what's going on here? Do you have any moments like this?
So counterintuitive moments. So, I think if you approach this, at the Gestalt kind of hypothesis that human beings, we are human beings, and our brains and our bodies and emotions work in human ways, that chances are when people interact with social robots, they're going to behave as people, like people, right? And they're probably going to interact with the robot in human familiar ways. And they may project and et cetera, based on our expectations of what it's like to interact with social others, whether they're people, whether they're companion animals, right? We just have these kinds of expectations. So I think that's kind of the first pass hypothesis in terms of, if you start from that premise, the interesting question is when does that kind of start to diverge or fall apart? So some of that is, well, if the robot just can't even keep up with the interaction and just like you can't interact with it socially because it's just incapable. So we see certainly examples of that. The latency is too strong. The expressive behaviors are counterintuitive. You don't understand what they mean. So you can have situations like that. I think things that have surprised me more have been less of the counterintuitive and more about how deep it goes, right? So we have been designing social robots that engage young children as personalized learning companions to develop language and literacy skills. And of course, the reason for that is because early childhood is an absolutely critical time for education. In the United States, we do not have a national early childhood education program, which means a minority of our students attend a quality preschool, which means a minority of our students are actually entering kindergarten and ready to learn. So there's a huge social injustice there, because if you start kindergarten behind, it's really hard and expensive to catch kids up, right? So there's just a very kind of social justice, practical, reason why we're trying to look at early childhood around language and literacy skills. So children of that age are not going to learn by reading, and they're not going to learn by typing on a computer. They learn through social interaction and play. So from a social robotics technical kind of challenge, it's also really, really interesting, right? Children, and plus children, they're kind of just going to go with the flow, right? They're not going to be metacogniting, is this a robot? Does it really, blah, blah, they're just going to go with the flow and interact with it, kind of at face value. So that's interesting, right? So there's a lot of kinds of things that, as a research question, as, in terms of trying to understand the benefits to learning and education, the outcomes, like, a lot of that, I think makes a lot of sense, okay? What we have been discovering that, of course, again, going back to the principle that humans are humans, we learn all kinds of things from each other. We don't just learn knowledge and skills. We learn attitudes, right? We learn all kinds of things. So we have discovered if you design a social robot to engage children as a peer-like companion, and you do that well enough, so children actually see the robot. They're not confused. They don't think it's a human friend. They understand it's a robot, but they still see it as kind of like this peer-like entity that's a robot. That if the robot models a growth mindset, if the robot models curiosity, if the robot models empathy, lo and behold, children start to emulate those behaviors, because we tend to do that when we interact with our peers. We tend to model and emulate those of our kind of group, right? That is really fascinating, because this means that you could imagine, designing robots as a peer-like companion that helps to model aspirational behaviors beyond just vocabulary and decoding and those kinds of skills to things like growth mindset, right? We've been able to see that. So what this means is, it's not just about building in the expressive abilities and so forth because it's fun for kids, because kids like the robot more. it is actually goes deep into how they're learning from the robot also, and what they can learn from the robot. So that's what I mean by some of the things that have been more surprising to me are not when things have gone counterfactually, but like how deep it can go. And again, now that speaks to kind of, again, the ethical responsible design, because you're like, whoa, this goes much deeper than what people previously had thought, which is, oh, it's just about making it fun. It's just about making it engaging. It's not. It is deeper than that. So if you do it if you do it the right way, So anyway, it's been more about that, I would say. I think the interesting twists around social robots in particular, and again, when we do our AI literacy work with kids, we've actually done this study where we're like, what if you accompany children who might live with a social robot for like a month and kind of get that experience of what that's like, living with the robot plus giving them just a coding curriculum where they can code that social robot, right? Living with the robot plus getting an AI kind of literacy curriculum so you kind of understand conceptually how it's designed. What are the differences and how children perceive the social robot in those different kinds of situations, right? So when you kind of couple their lived experience with the conceptual knowledge and direct experience with potentially programming it or just learning about it or doing all of that, right? Interestingly, what we seem to be finding is it doesn't matter how much kids have conceptually learned about AI or have coded the robot, when they interact with the robot in an interpersonal kind of way, that is kind of like robust in and of itself. And I think people would have thought that would have changed, right? Like, so you interact with the robot and it's kind of like this social agent, but then you learn about how it works and you've coded it, and now, of course, it's just a machine, and so when you interact with it, you're going to treat it just like a machine. No. That's not what we see at all. They still interact and engage with it and talk about it as a social agent. It's because we're human beings, I think. We're activating that social brain of ours, right? So that has been interesting. I think the first time someone's like really kind of systematically tried to tease that apart. The privacy thing is very interesting, right? So when you talk about trust and trustworthiness, there are now layers, right, of that, right? So and we have to tease this apart more in our own work, but when you ask a child questions around trust and trustworthiness, do they trust the robot, the agent, the persona? Do they trust the entity, the company, the organization that's capturing data potentially and shaping what that robot does, right? There are layers now of who are you talking about when you talk about trust, right? So I think this is kind of complexifying this story or this question of trust, trustworthiness, interpersonal trust, because there are potentially multiple entities at play when you introduce something like a personified AI technology into a human environment. So that is fascinating and something we're trying to understand. And again, educating people towards, because children don't understand, unless you particularly educate them around that, these layers of entity and agents. And do you trust them? So it's, we live in fascinating times. I want to prepare people for this time. Yeah.
So since we closed the end, I have a few questions for you. Maybe the first thing, if there's something in the robots you design, social robots, you wish to change, and maybe when you're thinking now, there's a feature, since you're highly inspired by science fiction and your story is very interesting, but when you think in your mind this feature, I wish maybe something, I don't know, from just imaginative minds. And
in terms of like social robot design, I guess more broadly, and what I might want to change or whatever, I think the one thing I've definitely learned through, the many social robots that we've designed over time, is the design space is huge, right? Again, there's this other kind of assumption that human is gold standard, right? That, and the goal somehow is to build a robot that is like an android, like literally looks and talks and behaves exactly like a human being. And I can tell you what I've learned is that is not the gold standard. You really have to think about what is the interaction, what is the role of the robot, what is the appropriate embodiment of the robot to fit the application and the user the best, to have the best fit, the best cognitive fit, the best behavioral fit, the best relational fit. So when we design a learning companion, again, robot for young children, yeah, you could build a little humanoid robot that looks exactly like a real child. But like, why would you do that when there's lots of real children that children can actually interact with and learn from? The intriguing thing is when you introduce something that's not quite like a human, but has enough of these properties like a companion animal where children don't feel judged. So they're willing to, take learning risks because making a mistake in front of your dog is not embarrassing or humiliating. You're not worried about people looking down on them when they do it. They're willing to try things out because there's this sense of not being judged by your dog, right? That is a different relationship, and that is an empowering, enabling relationship in its way, right? So it's just to say, it is not about building the human being plug compatible thing. That is not the gold standard. What you really need to do is think about it from a holistic design perspective. What is the right kind of, if you're going to build a robot, what is the right kind of robot and interaction and morphology and behavior and all of that? Like, that's what you need to grapple with and do well. So again, exciting, because I think the design space is actually, it's as big as our imagination, right? That to me is super fun, and exciting and fascinating. So, it's not that I would want to necessarily change anything, but just to acknowledge and appreciate the creative space we have to work within and embrace that.
Yeah, great. Maybe I want to ask you, what is your aspiration when you think the thing you wish to achieve in your lifetime that in social robots? You're really pioneering that, but I think when you feel very motivated and like feel the passion for what you're doing, but what is the aspiration and what makes you fulfilled as well? I think you have a lot of activities in literacy, for example, is something very, very admirable here, but what's your aspiration, the thing that you wish to see?
Yeah, so I would say, if we kind of look at the trajectory, I would say, of how we've been designing, called up personal technologies, from, the desktop computer to connecting it to the internet, to mobile devices, to smart speakers, right? That trajectory has all been kind of like increasingly capable, increasingly intelligent tools, right? Essentially tools, right? The social robot dimension is on a different dimension. It's about building a technology that engages us more like a helpful companion. That is a very different kind of vision than a useful tool, right? And, when we look at these challenges on global aging society, equitable, high-quality education for all people, healthy, chronic disease management that's effective for everyone, right? The thing that we see that's consistent across all of them is, high-quality social and emotional support is actually a really, really critical piece, again, of engaging human beings to be empowered, to engage, and to have the best outcomes for ourselves. So right now, human beings in general, that is the best we have, but we are not scalable. We are not affordable, right? We are not able to train enough professionals to meet the ever-growing demand. We will never be able to give every child a personal tutor at their beck and call, right? We just can't do that. We want to be able to support our human networks of care and education. So we want to augment those human professional networks. But we need to augment and expand them dramatically to have greater equity and opportunity for all people. That is where I think that the socially and emotionally intelligent AI really could be truly transformative, right? It's all around the equity and the efficacy and the experience that is very human-centered of what we need as human beings to be successful, that is affordable and scalable. To me, that is what I would love to achieve at some level. That minor thing, but to me, that's the opportunity. That's always been, I think, the much bigger and more ambitious opportunity for this kind of technology that is quite different from a smartphone and a smart speaker and a computer, quite different, but powerful in its unique ways of being able to engage us as human beings if we can do it effectively and responsibly. So that's the big vision.
Maybe a quick question also. If there's advice was given to you, maybe it was a life-changing advice given to you, or maybe advice you would love to give for people listening, whatever you like, advice given to you or something you can share here.
So my advice in general is human beings, we are precious and meaningful and really complex. And whatever we try to design or build or engineer to try to help make this world, this planet, a better place, and I would say not just for people, but for all living things, I think we need to always keep the values and the primacy around the living, the people. These are the most important things. And the science and all of that and the innovation is super exciting and impressive and powerful, but we have to get it right for those who are going to be impacted, who are going to be not just using these technologies, but will be impacted by these technologies. And it's demanding that we need to be more holistic in our education, in our views, in who we collaborate with, to be able to design these technologies that I think are actually going to really make a positive and meaningful difference. The AI genie is out of the computer science, beyond the computer science bottle now, right? So my advice would be, a lot of the world's most challenging problems are going to happen at the intersection of multiple disciplines. You need to have deep expertise in some areas, but you also need breadth and empathy and perspective to be able to appreciate and collaborate other ways of knowing, other ways of thinking about what rigor is, other ways of what success is, and I think the way we educate people today, it's still a little too siloed. We need to break down those silos. So that's my advice: is don't educate yourself in a silo, and always, first and foremost, be a human being, be an empathetic human being. Will serve you well.